Hello, my name is Erin Matheson, and this is my submission for Discussion 1. Classifying cultural products as art or not art determines which voices are preserved or silenced, which cultures are valued or erased, and how past, current, and future societies remember history. But what do we mean when we classify something as art or not art? Recall from Lecture 2, Aesthetic Significance, that our classification of texts is based on context, where the label applied to a specific text will inevitably change based on both the time period and who is judging the piece. For example, we can look at the cave paintings from Lecture 2. We found that during the time of their creation, they likely had a practical use and were not made just for aesthetic purposes. Nowadays, we see them as art because their purpose, as well as our perception of them, has warped over time. So, how does this interpretation affect texts labeled as art as well as those labeled as not art? These classifications are not an exact science, and therefore are subject to biases and social constructs of a person's positionality. This coincides with the fact that the value of certain texts changes over time. Often, artworks will gain value after their original creators are no longer able to produce new works. We saw this in Lecture 5, The History of Display in Western Civilization Part 1, where once ancient Greece fell, its texts, mostly statues, were valued and collected by high-ranking Romans to represent prestige and wealth. Since the pieces were in limited supply, the market value of original works rose as the Romans made copies of them to satisfy demand. It's also important to note that texts classified as art at a given time are often collected and preserved by the upper class in private collections and galleries, valued for both their cultural significance and monetary worth. As a result, works created by the working class can be overlooked or discarded, while the precious or fine texts of the upper class hold more importance. We refer to this as the hierarchy of value, mentioned in Lecture 4, A Cultural Studies Approach. This hierarchy causes a discrepancy in what we perceive as the life and culture of that time period and how it actually was. This distinction not only affects what is remembered, but also whose voices and experiences are represented in the history of cultures and societies. This highlights why the classification of high culture is problematic, as mentioned in Lecture 1, What are the Humanities? Because it allows many pieces of history to slip through the cracks. Specifically, by labeling lower-class cultural products as not art, the visibility and recognition of their communities can be erased over time. Conversely, when upper-class texts are classified as art, they are more likely to be preserved and revered, which in turn can create a skewed understanding of what a society valued and who it represented.